what you should know with each of these videos is I'm making adjustments as I go through posts, and I'm messing with some color schemes and I'm evolving them until I hope I can find a comprehensive way to distill any information, whether it be from Reddit, a TV show, comedy special, wherever, into a line of reasoning, into a heuristic for engaging with the world that will hopefully give us a better way to arrive at questions, to arrive at the place where we feel empowered and we feel our responsibility in how we're going to engage information, both in how we react and the assumptions that we make, and in how we allow things into our perspective and mind. So right now, if you look at my spreadsheet, it's going to be different from my first video. As I started reading another post, I realized that this post has a very specific audience that this person is addressing. And so we might change the assumptions and the ways that we frame what we're talking about, on whether or not we know we have an audience at all. Whether we're talking to our parents, whether we're talking broadly, whether we're talking to a specific kind of person that we see too often, and that seems to be what this person's post is. So I added audience to my spreadsheet, and I also color coded assumptions as gray in any of the posts that I read. So I'm going to read this post and I'm going to try to draw out the claims and notice any assumptions and go from there. So this post is nice because it highlights a couple things that happen when you're creating an argument or when you're trying to parse where somebody's coming from. This post has a lot of words that are all saying the same thing to me, or they're saying it in a slightly different way. So some of the claims are: you are vastly underestimating how much the two-party system has underrepresented the American left wing. This is in response specifically to people that this person says are saying America really is racist, or is making some other kind of quote-unquote doomer comment. Another claim is Trump didn't win because of conservatism as an ideology being more popular in America. That I'm not actually so sure of. I think that there are way more conservatives or conservative lights, just by disposition. But it's an interesting claim. And it's one that's pretty clear that you could go and study or bring data points to. This person follows that comment up later with, it's abundantly clear that 10 million votes did not go to the right, referring to 10 million people who just decided to sit out, which to me is a conservative mindset to not participate. But that's neither here nor there. Trump won because Democrats continue to run deeply unpopular conservative-like candidates that nobody fucking wants. Progressives are disillusioned with the it's your moral imperative rhetoric and arguments to basically engage in harm reduction, and just accept these candidates that don't enact or care about any of real progressive policies. These are considerably clearer claims than most people make, and these are things that you could go and back up with numbers, and these are things that you could ask very specific questions about. My first question is, how big is the left wing? And who's doing the recording of those numbers? Because clearly we have these massive party structures that are doing polling, that are doing surveys, that seem to have an idea of just how big or small their bases are. But perhaps nobody has a real grasp of just how left or right we really are, if you consider those coherent enough terms, which I don't to begin with. But how many people would support a quote unquote left policy if it was conveyed accurately, consistently across its representatives? We don't know that. I don't think, have a remote clue. And I seem to recall survey, or somebody was talking about how often, if you explain policy to people simply, methodically, and consistently, almost always they prefer the Democratic policy because it would generally help the poor, it would generally put more money in their pocket, it would generally give them access to services that they're struggling to get currently. But the Democrats seemingly refuse to message on things consistently. So when you frame it, I guess, as you're underestimating the left wing, perhaps now you're starting to beg the question or open the door to being more accountable as to how many are actually on the left, how we're going to define left. Do we want these policies that might be actually just more centrist or commonsensical? Do we want those characterized by the left even? And then with this post, I added another color scheme, some blue data. So I love anytime somebody's motivated to include some kind of number, some kind of thing that we can count to round out their perspective or what they're using to inform it. And they are influenced by the idea that 10 million people sat out. And I think that's an important thing to bear in mind. I think that's an important thing to build into what your approach is going to be next time. I do not know if, with the way that it is framed and positioned in this person's claims, that it's necessarily speaking to how the left is unrepresented or doesn't include a huge plurality of conservatives. I don't think that those necessarily follow, but this is the kind of data that might speak to this person if you are compiling numbers for who's sitting where, and then figuring out who's recording those numbers and how. This next post is kind of a doozy because it appears to have the same generalized central claim speaking to the troubles of men, and it's citing some data. It cites the men being down to nearly 40% of university and college enrollment. Now, again, this is a statistic that on its own doesn't necessarily say much. There could be dozens of reasons that men are going to school less. They may not have anything to do with there being a crisis with men in particular. This could be a story of automation and AI. This could be a story of lack of trade school opportunities, affordability, like who knows. But here's somebody who has opted to use the men aren't going to college as often statistic to lean into the idea that men are being tired of being told that they're the problem. This post makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least 7 claims that sort of echo that sentiment, but the way that they are packed is where we get very kind of confused and don't parse things out. Because in this person's mind, all of these claims exist as one central feeling-based truth about what men don't want to hear anymore. So if you can't read these on the screen, one is young men are tired of being told they're the problem. It's abundantly clear we're seeing a cultural shift in young Gen Z and Gen Alpha men in the West. Another claim is they're turning more and more conservative. Another claim is young men have been punished for the sins of the rich old men of today. The next, we didn't inherit their wealth or privilege. And instead of offering solutions, the left doubled down, blaming men and continually saying they need to, quote unquote, do better. I've also noted an assumption that this person wrote, which is if the roles were reversed, we'd be hearing about a crisis of unrepresentation of women in higher education, which maybe, maybe not, but it seems to pile on with the overt woe is me or woe is men connotative baggage that this post seems to be espousing. Now, again, this is not a post that I would engage too seriously. I guess I would have much broader questions for this person because I don't think they really know where they're coming from. I think they feel kind of down. I think they feel like there's an opportunity to throw some lazy reassertions and assumptions into the pot and antagonize people, which their edit at the end kind of seems like they're getting their jollies off of the antagonistic responses they're getting. So, question might be, how are you defining cultural shift? You think it's abundantly clear that we're seeing this cultural shift? Give me some more examples of the abundance in your clarity, because it doesn't feel that abundant or clear to me at all. It doesn't feel clear to me that they're turning more and more conservative. I want to know how you define conservative. I want to know what you think is conservative about the people that you are witnessing. He says, we didn't inherit their wealth or privilege. Those are two very, very loaded claims about where money currently resides, who's inheriting what and where, how you're defining privilege. Like, just right out the gate, he's using some of the most packed, loaded language to pile on to a feeling based sentiment. And I guarantee you, in his mind, and into a lot of people who will start to respond to him, they believe that they're maybe at the front door of some sincere exchange or some useful bit of back and forth information. All I'm gleaning from this guy is that he's kind of ho hum and throwing up his arms and is using words very, very lazily and matter of factly. And so you need to make sure you're checking yourself as like, is this the post to respond to? Is this the person who's going to give me greater insight on the woes of men in a more concrete way that I can then, talk to other people about? I don't think so. And you'll see real quick here, I kind of went and color coded, it's abundantly clear we're seeing a cultural shift in young Gen Z and Gen Alpha men in the West. I made that half gray, half yellow because it's both a claim, but it also has that, it's abundantly clear, assumptive language built into it. And so hopefully that can start to train our awareness for like when people are prefacing statements like, well, it's just so obvious. Well, anybody with ears and eyes can see it's abundantly clear. It's like, it's not. If this stuff was abundantly clear, there wouldn't be 1,000 posts about it in 24 hours. And then I went and wrote out some of the questions that I would have for this person before I was going to trust that they were open and willing to have a coherent conversation. How you define a conservative? Who has the wealth? What defines privilege? What constitutes this cultural shift that you're seeing? And then going from there, or probably not going at all realistically.